Modern hospitals are monuments to data, but amid the beeping monitors and fluorescent corridors, a few spaces remain beyond measurement. Veteran hospice nurse Trudy Harris spent decades in those spaces, watching thousands of patients slip from time into whatever waits beyond it. What she recorded cannot be graphed on an EKG. Hushed conversations with people no one else can see, smiles blooming a heartbeat before the final exhale, and the repeated conviction that death is not a wall but a door. Harris did not begin her career anticipating mystical encounters. She cut her teeth on crowded surgical wards, counting pulses and changing dressings with the brisk efficiency nurses everywhere learn. Yet she felt magnetized by the quiet rooms at the end of the hall, the ones where curative medicine had surrendered its fight and comfort became the only prescription. In those rooms, clocks seemed to slow, and the ordinary hierarchy of reality occasionally inverted. What the charts said mattered less than what the patient saw just beyond the ceiling tiles. Her first brush with the inexplicable arrived on a rain-slick Tuesday. A middle-aged carpenter, silent for days, suddenly opened his eyes, fixed them on a blank corner, and whispered, "Annie's here." Annie, Harris discovered, was his sister who had died in childhood. The carpenter's features softened, every crease smoothing as though lit from inside, and a breath later he was gone. Yet the room felt unnaturally full, as if invisible guests lingered. The experience rattled Harris's tidy worldview. She began jotting notes after each vigil, determined to capture patterns no medical textbook mentioned. Patterns flooded her journals faster than she could file them. Patient after patient, atheists and believers, toddlers and centenarians, reported nearly identical scenery just before death. A glow blooming like sunrise, beloved faces looking impossibly young, music humming at a frequency the living couldn't locate. One hard-nosed engineer who scoffed at religion suddenly sat upright, beamed toward the doorway and murmured, "It's even better than they said." For Harris, the consistency across personalities and pathologies argued against hallucination. Something larger was staging a welcome. The nurse noticed that these visions carried a peculiar clarity. Genuine delirium, triggered by fever, morphine, or low oxygen, tangles speech and spawns terror. Harris's patients, conversely, were lucid, tender, and serene. They often emerged from hours of unresponsiveness to deliver a single crystalline statement. "The light is here. They're waiting for me. I'm going home," before relaxing back into stillness and weeks of clinical decline suddenly closed in moments. Doctors who reviewed her timings scratched their heads. Neurochemistry in terminal freefall should not generate such brief islands of coherence, yet the records said otherwise. One evening, a World War II navigator, unconscious for 3 days, reached upward and articulated coordinates in flawless military cadence. His daughter wept as he mapped an as-yet unseen landing strip. Seconds later, he whispered, "Wheels down," slumped and died. The scene felt choreographed by an intelligence that understood both aeronautical procedure and the man's lifelong comfort in orders and bearings. Harris underlined the entry twice and added it to a growing cluster of stories suggesting that whatever greets the dying speaks their private language. Children confirmed the pattern with disarming directness. A 4-year-old leukemia patient, cheeks thin and translucent, giggled at empty air and told Harris, "Grandpa says I can ride the shiny horse." Moments later, she described a carousel made of light before drifting off. Pediatricians present could only shrug. No sedatives had been administered that night. To Harris, the child's joy felt contagious. Proof that mortality might be less of a tragedy and more of a reunion party where even the youngest receive invitations. Light itself became the story's most faithful character. Some saw it leaking through imagined door frames. Others felt it pour from the ceiling like liquid dawn. One woman, blind for a decade, traced glowing shapes in midair and announced the colors with absolute certainty. Rose gold, indigo, pure white. None of which she could have referenced from memory. "The light is alive," she said, and everyone in the room felt the hair on their arms rise as if charged by static. Skeptics occasionally visited, armed with textbooks on oxygen deprivation and cortical firings. Harris welcomed them, offered coffee, and invited them to sit through a night shift. Few stayed longer than a week. One young intern tried to catalog each patient's blood gas levels against the timing of visitations. His spreadsheet imploded under anomalies. "The data won't line up," he confessed, eyes wide. Harris smiled, not triumphantly, but with the resigned warmth of someone who has learned that mystery does not beg for validation. Her collected notes eventually blossomed into the best-selling book, Glimpses of Heaven, and the mailbags arrived. Letters from Ireland, India, Brazil. Families grateful for language that matched moments they thought only they had witnessed. A nurse in Manila wrote that after reading Harris, she stopped correcting patients who spoke to the unseen and started asking them gentle questions instead. "Their fear melted," the nurse reported, "and mine did too." Even some clinicians who had dismissed near-death research began referring colleagues to Harris's work. Over time, the nurse distilled a handful of insights she wished every family could hold when the monitors fall quiet. No one dies alone. Even estranged or orphaned patients spoke of vibrant companions arriving precisely when needed. Love is the prevailing atmosphere. Regardless of creed, the dying described a warmth that felt intelligent, an embrace woven into light. Language grows symbolic. They mention home, journey, dance, or garden, metaphors pointing beyond the hospital bed to a place already familiar. Fear evaporates late, often instantly. Terror shrinks the moment a patient recognizes whoever has come. Their heartbeat settles, breathing slows, resignation turns to anticipation. On one particularly stormy night, the power flickered, plunging the ward into generator hum. Harris checked on an elderly pianist whose hands had long ago stiffened with arthritis. Candlelight threw shaky shadows, and the old man's face glowed like bronze. "They brought my piano," he whispered, fingers flexing in phantom arpeggios. To Harris's astonishment, the man's gnarled knuckles loosened. His hands swept the air in silent concerto until, mid-crescendo, they rested on the covers. The generator clicked, lights returned, and the room felt both empty and holy. In recent years, researchers such as Dr. Christopher Kerr at Buffalo Hospice have amassed video testimony echoing Harris's notebooks. Dreams turning into visitations, deceased pets bounding into hospital rooms, soldiers greeted by lost comrades who salute in perfect uniform. Science has begun to rename the events from terminal agitation to end-of-life visions, a subtle but seismic shift that frames them not as pathology but as an integral phase of dying, one worth honoring, not suppressing. Harris never argues doctrine. She documents experience. Yet after thousands of vigils, she carries personal conviction. Consciousness does not dim at death, it widens. She likens the body to a lantern. When the casing cracks, the light doesn't perish, it escapes. In staff meetings, she reminds anxious new nurses that their calm presence might be the last earthly kindness a person perceives before stepping into something vast and luminous. For families bracing themselves, she offers practical counsel. If your loved one stares past you and speaks to someone unseen, lean in, ask who has arrived, and listen. The dying often relay messages. "Tell Tom I've forgiven him. The baby is with Grandpa. That can ease generational wounds in a heartbeat. Trying to correct or sedate those moments, Harris warns, is like turning off a lighthouse because you don't understand electricity. Harris's own fear of mortality evaporated years ago. She jokes that she now feels more curiosity than dread about her last breath. "I've read the travel brochures," she quips, "and the destination looks spectacular. When friends ask what terminal patients most regret, she says the answers are mundane: working too late, staying angry too long, but never does someone wish they had refused the radiant visitors. The true horror," she suggests, "would be to die convinced the universe ends at the skin." The nurse's journal closes with the story of Margaret, a fiercely private poet whose cancer spread like spilled ink. Hours before death, Margaret asked Harris to open the window though January winds howled. "I need to smell the snow," she whispered. Harris obliged, icy air swirling. Margaret inhaled, smiled, and said, "It's the same scent as when I was born." She paused, eyes shining. "They've braided the wind with music." Those were her last words. When the monitor flatlined, the room smelled unmistakably of winter woods, pine, frost, a hint of lilac no florist could trace. Harris wrote one sentence beneath the entry: "There are fragrances no perfumer will ever bottle." If you one day find yourself at a bedside, remember Harris's decades of quiet evidence. Sit gently, breathe, and notice. When a loved one whispers into empty air, something more than physiology may be unfolding. Something woven of reunion, forgiveness, and a light so welcoming that even the bravest words stumble to describe it.